Hello, my name is Adam, and welcome to the cast from the Crypt.
I'm Adrian, and
Hello.
I'm here, and I'm ready.
So this is our fantastic first episode to this new podcasting adventure. We are going to talk about everything we want to. I guess we're going to talk
Yeah,
about horror movies. We're going to analyze some films, and they're mostly probably not going to be good movies, but I think all of the movies we're going to talk about are probably going to be entertaining nonetheless.
yes, absolutely. And there's other things that we want to venture into, but you and I are fans of the genre. We love horror. We've been talking about horror movies, on podcasts for a while now together. But this is the latest iteration, and I'm very excited.
I am too. I've absolutely been raised on horror, and I feel like at this point in my life, I've spent a good 21 years learning the tips of the trade, and I feel confident enough to talk about it. And I'm especially more confident now that I have you here to talk about it. So
Boom.
let's get into it. For our first episode, we've just gone to the theater. It's October 17th today. Yesterday we saw Halloween Kills. Why not begin with such an iconic franchise? And why not keep it seasonal too?
Yeah, yeah. um, I'm excited for the plans that we have. We're going to cover Halloween Kills, then proceed and cover the Halloween reboot, not quite a remake, that came out 2019. And then, of course, on Halloween Day, we're going to release an episode talking about the classic John Carpenter Halloween film. So a pretty tight three we got coming up here, and I'm pumped.
I am too. I think a good slasher is the great way to get into it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You and I we're experts, I'd say, on the slasher subgenre.
We know everything there is to know about slashing. And I think Halloween might be my favorite slasher franchise, at
Mm.
least a selection of the movies. And this is a very interesting entry into the franchise.
God, this movie is. I mean, I'll say it right off the bat before we even begin. This movie just sucked so bad. This is not a good movie. However, did we have a blast? Yeah, we had a blast. It was very fun, but geez, dude, does this movie just fall so far from where I personally wanted it to be, and it falls so far from where the 2019 reboot.
2018.
Excuse me, I said 2019 earlier. From where the 2018 reboot landed. This movie, this is a rough ride, but a ride nonetheless.
Yeah, and they have, I think, just recently announced that they're going to be making the final movie in this trilogy called Halloween Ends. And I'm not sure when that's going to come out, but I think it's got it's left much to be desired. I hope
Yeah.
I think it'll probably be a better movie than this one. I think it'll be probably a good ending because the story of Laurie Strode and Michael Myers really lends itself to a very over-the-top climactic ending, much like what we got in the last movie, but
Yeah.
they're gonna have to top that, so I think it's gonna be pretty crazy.
Well, you and I were guessing yesterday, because spoiler alerts ahead, and I just think for the record, on our previous show, which we did somewhere else, uh, we just spoiled every single movie, and that's basically what we will do moving forward. So I think it's fair to put this out there, like spoilers, pretty much always spoilers. And now I'm going to spoil it. Yeah, I knew that there would be a third movie in this new trilogy that they've created as soon as Laurie Strode was in the hospital. When she was in the hospital and it was clear that she would not be able to fight Michael, I knew the third movie was imminent. Because there's just no way that you're going to pay Jamie Lee Curtis all of this money and not have her, face off with Michael when she, has her full strength. And now there are stakes because Laurie Strode's daughter is killed at the very end of this movie. So we have some stakes moving into the third one, and I'm expecting big things because wow, this movie. I should say you were with me, of course, but I was laughing my ass off this whole movie, and it was not trying to make me laugh. uh, I mean, which should be a red flag. This movie has some really, really, really bad writing. Some of the worst writing I've seen in a horror movie in quite some time. I should rephrase, in a modern, big release in quite some time, which is saying something because like I've seen most of the Conjuring movies, and this movie takes the cake.
Well, yeah, a lot of the writing is much to be desired. I think the best way to describe this movie is the film drops radically in quality when Laurie Strode or Michael Myers is not on the screen. And since this movie did not really have much of Laurie in it, as opposed to the last one, it just wasn't going to be as good. And going into it, I didn't think it was going to be as good. The Halloween movies seem to follow this formula of like the first movie's really good, the second movie's not as good, and they've done that during most of the reboots. And I feel like the further away you get from the original movie, the less good it's going to be. So the first reboot was a direct sequel to the original movie, and this movie is a sequel to the reboot. So now we are twice removed from the original, and things are getting worse.
Yeah, they are. And you know, these new rather installments of Halloween are interesting because David Gordon Green is at the helm, and though he has done some dramatic work in the past, I think he's obviously most known for, stoner comedies. He did Pineapple Express and he did Your Highness. I think he also wrote some episodes of Eastbound and Down and Vice Principals, which are both Danny McBride comedies that I believe aired on HBO or Comedy Central or something. Nonetheless, this man is he comes from a comedy background, and I just find it interesting that this is his passion project, and this is what he and his co-collaborator Danny McBride have chosen to do for the next 5 some years. And as I was watching this movie, the stark contrast between this installment and the previous 2018's Halloween really just I don't know, it floored me because what we have here is a tonally inconsistent mess of a movie. And there are some real victories in this film. You and I can probably both agree that this is some of the best big screen horror gore I have seen, perhaps ever. I might have to throw that out there. Perhaps ever. The kills here are phenomenal, but the laughs I think are unintentional, and the tone is just all over the place, incredibly inconsistent. And I left the movie theater not really knowing what to think about this movie. And though I had fun because I was with you and I was with friends, as an installment to what is a legendary slasher franchise, it just didn't quite deliver for me personally. So I'm expecting big moves from the third movie. And we can, of course, we will, of course, talk about the specifics of what we didn't enjoy. But there was just so much going on in this movie. For me, it, as you said, it left a lot to be desired, and more so, I don't know, with the COVID delay and the time that they had on this, I just wish they would have presented a tighter project, something more cohesive.
Yeah, I think I got almost pretty much basically what I expected going into this
Wow,
movie. You seem to be a little. I think maybe you should have put your bar a little lower, but
maybe.
I thought don't go in looking for the plot, don't go in for the writing or the dialogue. Go in for Michael Myers. Let's watch Michael slash some victims. And I think they did a fantastic job of that. At the ending, already did a spoiler warning, but at the ending of the last movie, of course, he's left in Laurie's burning house, and you think he's gonna burn to death, but at the beginning of this movie, some firefighters show up and put the fire out. He emerges, and he looks even scarier than he did in the last movie. He looked very scary last movie. This withered, older version of the mask was really striking, and in this one, it's like bubbled over and burnt, and it's just terrifying. And Michael is terrifying on the screen. The one thing they did right that they could have easily really messed up is they didn't make Michael goofy. They didn't try to add any zaniness to it, like the Rob Zombie Halloween's tried to humanize him in a way and give him a backstory. And this Michael Myers is perhaps the most dehumanized Michael since the first movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's a plot point even that he is evil incarnate. They established that by the end of this movie. That, yeah, and I'm in agreement with you. I think that's the strongest point of this movie is by the end, we know this is evil incarnate, and it sets up that third movie very nicely. And I say third movie, of course, because these two are direct sequels to the first Halloween, just for anybody that doesn't know that. But it's a softball, and I'm really hoping that this third movie hits it out of the park, because now we've essentially got a near immortal Michael Myers, which, you know me and my immortal slashers. I love a good, just near supernatural slasher film. That's what I love about Friday the 13th so much. It's evil incarnate, taking on evil incarnate. Now, they really do kind of ham-fist this and force it down your throat a few times with the evil dies tonight. A few times there are these large ensemble scenes where people start chanting that, even though in the beginning of the movie it seems like none of the townspeople remember the 70s massacre that Michael Myers went on. It's incredibly inconsistent and poorly written. But nonetheless, they eventually agree that evil will die tonight and start chanting it at the top of their lungs.
Every character, too.
Every character, yeah. I mean, everyone. Every single one. It was incredibly cringe-inducing and and a little rough. But nonetheless, this take on Michael I really dig. And I completely agree that burned look where the burned hair on the left side of the mask, very neat. Very fun. Yeah. Oh, God. And that opening shot in the film, or rather the first time we see him on screen, where he walks out of the burning house and he's staring at all of the firefighters that are just about to become fodder. It's incredible. It's a great shot. Very, very validating.
Yes. And when he first came out and I saw this army of firefighters in front of him, immediately I was kind of, I didn't like it. I was kind of nervous as to what was happening, because it was like, well, is he just going to go kill all these firefighters? And I thought it would probably look a little goofy, but then he started doing it and I really enjoyed it, because there's some good slashing. Sorry to the firefighters. He has this like pickaxe that he's just smashing heads in with all the firefighters too. When he comes out, they don't look at him like he's perhaps a victim trapped in a fire. They immediately like get axes out, because he clearly is a force to be reckoned with and is not here to be saved. And he immediately just starts killing all of them. There's one goofy part where they try to spray him with a fire hose, and it's clearly like nowhere near as powerful as a fire hose would be. It's more like someone put their thumb over a water hose.
Yeah, they take a super soaker to his chest.
Yeah, it's
and we get a very goofy shot of just this trickle of water bouncing off of Michael Myers' chest, and then of course he walks towards the guy and caves his head in with a pickaxe. However, do we really care? No, we want that. We want the blood to fly. All right, and we got it. Again, the kills in this movie are elite. There's of course that incredible buzzsaw kill. I believe it's the final firefighter
Oh
kill.
yes, it's fantastic. I think she has a buzzsaw and she raises it above her head to slash Michael with it, and he grabs her arms and pushes it back towards her and just feeds her the buzzsaw. And it's
Yeah.
so gruesome.
Certainly not firefighter friendly, but pretty fantastic nonetheless. I'm sure some unions are going to be up in arms about it.
Right, and from there he moves on, and while a lot of the kills are slashing, just this knife, I feel like they use it sparingly enough. They get really creative with a lot of the kills, and I think they're all just so good. It's like if you were playing Mortal Kombat and pulled off every fatality just in a row. It's just so satisfying.
Yeah, and he is in Mortal Kombat now. So
That's true. That's true.
so it's perfect. But yeah, so what I find interesting and when I think this movie is strongest is when it actually deviates from the narrative. So we pop around Haddonfield, Illinois quite a bit in this movie. But there are several self-contained scenes where we meet couples and we meet people and we see directly how they are affected by Michael Myers and how ultimately Michael Myers kills them. And these are strong scenes with what I think is some pretty strong character work as compared to the rest of the movie. One of the first couples that we see, get murdered brutally by Michael Myers is this older couple that they are Laurie Strode's neighbors. And, they kind of bantering, talking about like hooking up over a glass of wine. I think the husband's trying to get lucky and the wife's not having any of it. Or so we think they're married. But nonetheless, as they are trying to, cupcake, perhaps.
Liven up the Halloween night.
Yeah, liven up the Halloween night. Shonda is what I believe her name is.
Yes.
She's like flying around
It's
a drone.
Sandra and Roger.
It's Sandra?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sandra and Roger. They're like playing with this drone toy. And it's really, really dumb. The drone is super, super silly, but it's not very important. What matters is that she flies it into a room and it just gets thrown out onto the couch. And both her and her man are sitting there just in awe of who could have thrown the drone back at us? Who's in there? And immediately, after just like maybe a minute of investigation, they are both murdered in what is just an incredible display of brute force over two elderly people. I was actually, to be honest, shocked at the visceral nature of these first two kills. I could not believe that they started the movie off that way, especially Sorry.
It's a very high note to begin on, and I think
it's
so brutal. I think maybe some people might be a little too disturbed by it, but I personally loved it. It put some realism in the movie that I thought was due, considering everything else that happens.
Yeah, we also feel nothing.
Yeah. So. What you mean about me and you specifically?
Yeah, you say it's brutal, but like we feel nothing.
Oh yeah, no, we're incredibly desensitized. I feel like we always say this.
Yeah, but the kills are pretty gruesome. Mind you, they're both elderly. They seem like sweet people. They actually do a great job of setting that up. Michael just destroys Roger, this older man. He bangs his head into a wall. Actually, the way it happens is Michael hides behind a window, shoves his arm through the glass, grabs the man's head, and starts banging it into the wall. And as he's banging it, he sees the shards of glass, on where the seam of the window that he just broke, and he shoves the man's head onto the glass, and then just like proceeds to like smear the head all over the glass, having a really good time with it. He's actually not done with Roger's body. up until a little later in the scene. But he does move on to Sandra after this.
Yes. And Sandra is terrified. She just saw this monster pull her husband through a window and kill him. And she runs to the kitchen, starts screaming. She grabs a knife and is up against the door, and she can't get the lock done in time. And so she turns around and is just crying and looking at this man who she knows is going to kill her. And she's got this knife and she's, just pointing at him and just crying. And Michael looks at her, and then he looks over and sees a fluorescent light bulb above the stove, and he just takes it out and smashes it in half. So now he's got this long, sharp tube of glass, and she starts screaming and crying more because from her perspective, she's just sitting there and watching this man prepare the way he's going to kill her. And then he does exactly that. He walks up to her and just puts it in her throat, and there she dies.
Yeah, and then the last shot in this scene is her watching Michael stab every single knife they have in their knife block into her husband's chest. I mean, he's just driving them. Oh, excuse me, his back. He's just driving them into his back with every ounce of force he can muster. And that is one of the first scenes that we have in this film. It is quite the start. Especially, and while I do like the firefighter scene, it's very choreographed. It's edited in such a way where the action happens out of camera quite a bit. It's just not it's brutal. And yet the way that they shoot it and edit it is very flashy, right? It looks almost like something out of an action movie, the way that we watch it. But this scene, much more pulpy, much more gritty, and it results in some genuine fear. I mean, I actually was like really grossed out in this first scene, especially with that fluorescent light bulb being driven into that woman's neck. And we watch it. We watch it happen. We literally watch every inch of that thing get driven into her. So, some choice direction at the very top of this film.
Yeah, and as good of a we both had some discussion as to why he stabbed all these knives into this man's back, but I think it is a good demonstration that they understand the character of Michael Myers, because in many of the sequels, he's just this killer. He just kills and then walks away. But in the original movie, he dresses the body in certain. He always messes with the body in many ways. Like he hides them in a way that when Laurie would discover them in the original movie, they like fell in front of her. One like fell, was hanging from the ceiling. He put that tombstone in the bed. Like he's clearly like as robotic and just a killer as he is. He also just does these disturbing things with the corpses, and this is the first instance of him doing that in this movie, and he actually does it again later on in the film.
Yeah, he plays with the bodies several times throughout this movie. And I had brought it up to Adam, that's not very Michael Myers-esque. But you pointed that out, that this is a sequel to the first movie. And in the first movie, he does play with the bodies quite a bit. You tend to forget that first film after all those other entries that take so many liberties with the characters of Michael Myers. Some of them not even having Michael Myers in them. It's interesting, and after you told me that, my appreciation for this film did go up quite a bit. However, that being said, I think while it's fun and it adds shock value, I just think that the all the play from Michael took away from the fear of it a little bit. For me, personally. If he's evil incarnate, I just don't really buy that he would take all this time to mess around with the bodies and do all these weird formations. It felt cartoonish to me. And in some scenes, there's such a stark contrast. He is so brutal and so unforgiving. And in other scenes, he does a simple, knife stab, and it's done. And for me, that felt a little inconsistent in this movie.
Well, one of the reasons I think you might feel that way is because this is the first time we see Michael actually mess with the body. In every other scene in the first movie and in the reboot and in this movie, you see the results of him playing with the body, but you never see him do it. And here we actually see him drive those knives into this body.
You're right.
And it's one of the least extreme ways he's messed with the body, of course. In the first movie, the first reboot, the 2018 Halloween, there's that, what I personally loved it, amazing scene where they find this cop that he's killed, and he's like somehow scooped out much of this man's head and put a flare inside of this severed head, so it's like a human head jack-o'-lantern, and I just love it. And they do give you another shot of it in this movie. I guess they're just flexing on how cool it was. They want you to know. They want you to remember.
It was pretty cool, to be fair. It was one of my favorite moments in the first movie. Well, rather, the reboot. I was so glad that they brought that back. There's a few callbacks to various movies in this film, which I enjoyed. I will say, if you're a fan of Michael Myers, you're probably really going to enjoy this movie. I think this movie was made for the fans. When I'm hard on it, you have to keep in mind, I'm not the biggest Halloween fan. You know that. You're by far a larger Halloween fan than I am. And it's not to say that I didn't like it. I don't know. I found myself making fun of this movie more than I was having fun with it.
I don't know. I guess that's where we disagree. I was just here for the Michael. I was here for the kills.
That's fair.
I guess continuing along with our slow crawl through the plot, we now go to a bar on Halloween. We're introduced to this character. One's dressed as a doctor, the other's a nurse. It's this couple, this husband and wife, and the husband's very like kind of an incel. He's very soft, and his wife's like, you need to stand up for yourself, go tell your boss off. Some people start being too loud behind him, and she makes him tell them to stop. And they've established these characters, and they're going to be fodder. But they try to establish them a little bit first instead of just showing some random guy get killed, which they do for almost every other kill. But as we're in the bar, they take a break from the music. Someone's on stage, and he gives this speech about commemorating the victims of Michael Myers and his survivors. And we find out that this person is, of course, Tommy Doyle, who was the little boy Laurie Strode was babysitting for in the first movie. He's now all grown up and played by Anthony Michael Hall. And this speech is the intro to this character that leaves a bad taste in your mouth and is foreshadowing just the absolute trash fire that is this character. I hate him so much.
Yeah.
He's probably my least favorite part about this movie. First of all, he begins to tell the story of the original killing as if it's a ghost story. It's very entertaining, and then he turns it into, and now we remember the victims, like it's a memorial.
And then he points to them in the bar, and he said, she was and forgive me, I don't remember their names, and to be honest, I don't even care to. But like he points to one, and she lost her babysitter that night, and he points to another, and she was a nurse that night, and it's terrible. Yes. And they're all just old actors that clearly don't work very much.
Well, the girl he points to is Lindsay Wallace, who is the other child Laurie was babysitting for in the original. So they brought back both of these characters.
Well, I'm glad they got their check, but God help them. They're the worst part of this movie. They are the worst part of this movie. In fact, this entire drama surrounding the town and how the town is going to end Michael once and for all, is by far, the the biggest anchor to this film. And what's unfortunate is, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's most of this movie's runtime.
Yes, it's too much of this movie's runtime.
Yeah, yeah. It you have to keep in mind, right? This movie is a sequel to a '70s film, and a film, mind you, set in the '70s. So we have a lot of old people in this movie that were in the original. We have a lot of characters that were supposedly around during the events of the original film. And so, because they're trying to do this thing where the town is getting involved in this movie's events, there is all of these flashbacks and a painful, and I mean painful, amount of exposition that really detracts from what this movie is supposed to be, a slasher with Michael Myers at the helm. And I mean, it's some of the most cringe-inducing, just hair-pulling, mind-numbing writing you could ever see in a movie. If you were to, this movie is a masterclass in gore and in really interesting kills, and simultaneously, it's a masterclass in terrible writing. Like, just awful, 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 stinkerific expositional writing. Ugh.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. These characters are so poorly written. And one thing they try to do, and they do much better in the first movie, is they really are kind of rehashing a bit of the old characters. They're bringing them back for nostalgia purposes and to, I think, legitimize the movie more. You know, all the Halloween movies that didn't have Jamie Lee Curtis are not remembered. You know, nobody's even seen those, and they don't matter. So when they rebooted this franchise, one of the biggest things was here's Jamie Lee Curtis, Laurie Strode, right there, and she's here to fight Michael Myers. It's this classic. You know, she's Laurie Strode is one of the most classic final girls in any slasher, and there's this rivalry between her and Michael that they expand upon more in this film. She wants to kill Michael, and Michael, of course, is indiscriminate evil. But they also brought back Officer Hawkins, who was in the original movie. He was the cop that came and stuff, and they're bringing these characters back to kind of show you that here it is, everything's back. All these, you know, they're really trying to make these characters seem legendary, and really giving them some importance just because they were in the original. But just because they were in the original does not mean that they're important. In this movie, they do that again by bringing in Tommy Doyle and Lindsay Wallace, and the two kids that she was babysitting could not be more unimportant in this movie. In the original, the only thing they did was raise the stakes and make the danger more realistic because there are children involved now. And here it's they act like these characters have any significance to the story, and nobody cares about them. I didn't. I really didn't care.
Yeah,
And
I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say Anthony Michael Hall as Tommy Doyle is so poorly written. They try to make him this badass, and he so is not. This little bald, pot-bellied man is running around with a baseball bat, talking about how cool he is and how he's gonna kill Michael Myers, and it's immediately I'm like, sure you are. You know, like this absolute clown. They really try to make him badass. There's this horrible scene where there's a crowd behind him and he like puts this bat over his shoulder and looks at the camera like as tough as he can, and it's so laughable. I think we did laugh at it. It's ridiculous, and you so don't care about this character. He means nothing to you, and he's clearly not going to be a threat to Michael.
Easily my least favorite anime intro was the scene when they were walking toward the car in which they believe Michael Myers is in. There's this whole red herring with this escaped inmate from the first film that like is going around town that they unfortunately basically murder for no good reason because they fool everybody into thinking, or rather they make everybody believe that he's Michael Myers even though there's no indication that this is the man capable of murdering all of these people. He's literally this like small Danny DeVito-esque man. And it's just terrible. So we do find out pretty early on that like he's the guy that's in the vehicle that they're surrounding. But I digress. There's a shot of all the townsfolk walking around the car, and my man Michael C. Hall, is that his name?
Anthony Michael Hall.
Sorry, my man Anthony Michael Hall approaches the vehicle in what seems to be slow motion, but really I just think his cholesterol was high that day, and so he was moving a bit slower. It's really really bad. It's really bad. And you said it's poorly written. It's not only that for me. I think this man hasn't acted since he was 9 years old. And if he has, he was in a community theater piece. Like,
Oh, absolutely. He's in Breakfast Club though. Just throwing that out there.
Oh, my bad. That other mediocre movie.
No, yeah,
Also,
I agree. I absolutely agree. I hate that movie, but
that
we
movie
digress.
sucks. That is the movie people think they're cool for liking, and they couldn't be more wrong.
Anthony Michael Hall is kind of a big name, though.
Is he?
Yeah, he is. He's in a lot of stuff. He's in like 16 Candles and like Weird Science.
Okay, well, his career can stay in the 80s because he is the worst part of this movie as far as performances go. I mean, he's so one note, so bland, and the direction and writing don't help him one bit. I feel like I'm really ripping this movie. There are really good moments, I swear. But this is such a weak point. Again, all the expositional stuff is so weak. It's really, really hard to to sound positive about any of it.
Yeah, and I'll talk about this just a little bit because it's way too big of a part of the movie, and I would like to talk about it as little as possible. Later in the film, they're all at the hospital. You know, Laurie's in the hospital because she got stabbed in the last movie, and they're doing surgery. And this is why she's not big in this movie, is she's been incapacitated in the last one. She can't really fight Michael. And like patient after patient after patient is coming into the hospital because they had some run-in with Michael Myers, and now they're messed up and they're being rushed to the ER, and there's a huge crowd in the hospital. The police are there, but they've kind of lost control of the situation, and Tommy has riled the people up, and he's really trying to start this vigilante mob, basically, and they all start chanting "Evil dies tonight," and you shiver every time you hear it. But this is why they end up killing that other inmate. They think it's Michael because he's wearing inmate clothes, and they all chase him, and he jumps out of a window out of fear that this mob is going to tear him apart, which they would. And then he just goes on, is like, sorry. And he goes on.
Yeah, they never talk about this man that they senselessly murdered.
Yeah, no, they say sorry. And they try to do this weak point of like, Michael has turned us into monsters, and you so don't care, and it takes up way too much of the movie.
And no, he didn't. You did this. like yes, you were all trying to kill Michael, but also like it didn't take a genius to know that that man was not Michael. If Michael wears a mask, why would he all of a sudden stop wearing it and be afraid of you all? If he's known to senselessly murder people in the most brutal fashion, why is he running from you? It just makes no sense. I don't know why they included this. And in my opinion, the movie was a little too long. And this whole scene, this arc, if you will, was, I'd say like 25 minutes, maybe 30. Easily could have been cut. Because they even try to introduce this sheriff character. He's got an interesting design. He's a huge, tall, big barrel-chested man with a cowboy hat. And I don't know, like they try to create tension between him and Tommy, and it's just not there. And the sheriff is on screen for all of like 10 minutes and ultimately says maybe three things. And at the end, it ends with him like looking at his hat that's been trampled and like just being sad on a staircase. Very silly stuff. I don't know, just not important. Could have been cut.
Absolutely. And but you know, anyways, meanwhile, Tommy has created all these little vigilante groups who are gonna go. They're going out and they're gonna get Michael, and like, it's the dumbest thing. It's like the cannon fodder has organized, in ways that they're going to systemically send themselves to go kill Michael, and he of course does. But before this, I guess we jumped ahead for the hospital bit, but let's go back. Michael ends up getting a hold of one of these little ragtag vigilante groups, and it includes that doctor nurse couple duo and a few other patrons of the bar, and they all think they're gonna get him, and they so do not. He gets inside of a car with them, and here we have some really good kills again. Michael chokes a guy to death, I believe. He stabs the nurse guy through the face, basically, like up. He takes a knife and puts it like up into his jaw, and you can see the knife go like through his eye socket and into his brain. And
he shucks his eye like an oyster.
Yeah, it looks great. Like, and it's such it. The gore in this movie looks so real, and this does too. It's so good. But then one of the funniest kills is when his doctor wife, I guess, comes to save him. She has a deagle. Deagle.
She's got a Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 just massive Desert Eagle. And then she chases Michael Myers back toward the SUV where her husband's just been murdered. She starts shooting at him. Can't handle the gun because, like, nobody can shoot a Desert Eagle effectively. It's a massive caliber round. I don't know why that was the gun that was selected for this movie, or for this scene, rather. Like, I just don't think civilians carry those ever. But nonetheless, she's trying to hit him. Of course she can't. And Michael Myers simply kicks the car door at her, and the gun turns around and just blows her own brains out. And that's, I think, maybe the only gun kill I've ever seen in a Halloween movie.
It's the only gun kill Michael's executed. And really, she did it herself in a "why are you shooting yourself" fashion. It was funny because of how quick it was. He just kicked her hand, and then bam, there goes her head.
It was funny. It was visceral. I laughed so hard during that scene. And apparently, I did not hear it myself, but apparently someone in the movie theater was displeased with my enjoyment of that scene. They didn't like that I laughed and said, "Who's laughing?" To which I wish I would have answered, "How are you not?" It is some of the goofiest stuff I've ever seen on screen.
Right, but you weren't the only one laughing.
No. That person was watching a different movie than I, clearly.
Yeah, they gotta take the stick out of their ass, but
yeah. They were watching a different movie because that was funny as hell, and it truly, and this is a compliment, shocking. No, I should say, sorry. It's a compliment. It was stupid, but really fun.
Yeah, it was a good kill. It's just like kind of interesting too. It's not the typical just stab him with a knife.
No, not at all. And it was also pretty funny because the character was making a big deal about how her husband didn't know how to shoot a gun. And so she was very gun-ho, pun intended, about taking the gun into her own hands and handling business. And then she just dies in the silliest way.
That's the one thing I like about this movie is so many characters are like, stop, I'm gonna take care of this, and then get absolutely slaughtered like pigs. It's great. Like everybody thinks they're badass, and then Michael just rips them apart. It's so great.
Yeah,
Um,
it's that's the strongest part about this movie is it spares basically nobody. Um, and that's why when it chooses to spare people down the line, I wonder why,
it's
and
a
it's a
little
little
annoying.
upsetting.
Yeah, it's upsetting.
But we can talk about that when we get there.
I'd like it if you come across Michael, you die. Like I feel like that should be the rule, and it
Yeah,
mostly is. It is for the most part. But in that same scene, there's another old woman who was in the bar. And this felt like the most self-aware part of dialogue, or this felt like the most self-aware writing in the whole movie. This old woman was in the car and she pulls out this little revolver and she looks up at Michael and she's so small and so old and she's got this gun and she goes, "This is for Dr. Loomis." And then pulls a trigger and nothing happens. The gun is like not loaded, I guess. And then Michael just, I think he just snaps her neck, doesn't he?
I believe he like shoves her head onto the broken car glass, like of the window. And then yeah, just like snaps her neck. It's brutal. It's brutal,
great.
and like at certain points, for someone that's a well-adjusted, like normal human, unlike us, I imagine it would be pretty hard to watch. Because
Yeah.
some of the gore is really visceral.
Yeah. I think that was the most self-aware bit of writing because it felt like they knew that was like a dumb line and that's why they killed her like that. But I don't know.
See,
That for the rest of the movie though, they don't feel self-aware at all. So I don't know.
yeah. I'm not sure if they really thought I don't know if they realized how bad the writing was. I think I don't know. Did they rush it? Did they rush this movie?
They had
I guess
time.
we'll never know. They did have time. That's true. Um, we already talked about this, but I just want to go back. I thought that the hospital scene was really funny because they're like, we don't have enough people in the ICU to cover this. Uh, and I was just thinking the whole time that the COVID variant in this town is Michael Myers.
That's true. The Michael variant?
They can't handle the wave of Michael Myers murders. And so they don't have the people, so they have to call other towns. Very silly, and a bit of writing that aged beautifully considering the situation we're in currently.
It was made just before the pandemic shut everything down, and that's why they delayed it to this
Yeah,
year. It was supposed
right.
to come out
And I
last
don't
year.
blame them because this movie's made a killing in the box office so far. So it was probably good that they waited,
Yeah.
because they wouldn't have had this solid of an open.
And
But
this is, digressing a little. That's kind of one of the things I absolutely love about this movie. I don't think it's streaming anywhere. And if it is, it'll probably be after it is out of theaters. I like that this movie has committed itself to theaters. I don't think we see that enough. And I think a movie, especially a slasher like Halloween, horror movies like this really were meant to be seen in a theater. And I really absolutely preferred the experience in the theater than I could get at my home. I think a lot of the enjoyment I got from this movie was being in a theater with a crowd of people. So every kill, you would hear an audience go, "Ooh!"
yeah,
and every dumb
yeah.
line, you'd laugh with them. And I think that made it that much more enjoyable. And that's why I had a lot of the fun I did.
Well, and didn't that feel so good, right? To just be in a relatively full theater with with a group of people that were there for the same reasons as us. Like I just thought it was so cool. Being in that room and like going on this journey with other people. I forgot what that felt like, to be honest with you, because most of the podcasting that we've done has been during the pandemic, on streaming services. And it was nice to start off our new project with something in the movie theater.
Right. Something we could watch together in theaters. And it felt really good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Big screen Michael, too, is fantastic.
Big screen Michael. Yeah, I just an interesting note that I found out earlier. This is actually the best open for an R-rated film since the pandemic began. It actually like doubled what Suicide Squad had made
Really?
in the box office. Yeah, so this movie, as far as the pandemic era box office release, pretty big.
Well, good. I'm glad. And it is important to note that when Suicide Squad released in theaters at the same time they began streaming it on HBO Max,
Yeah.
and maybe they made money that way, but you obviously miss out on a lot of uh the theater money when you do something like that. And I think if you
Yeah.
force people to go to the theater, they will if they really like the movie. And this is a franchise we love. It's October. It's Halloween. Why not go see this in theaters? We had a great time. I'm glad. I'm glad it wasn't. In a way, I'm glad it wasn't on a streaming service because I don't want to see theaters go out of business. That's a
Me
great.
neither.
That's something I really love, and I hate to see it take such a blow from streaming.
Yeah, and I'm almost positive that the studios make more money when they choose to go streaming. I'm fairly certain that the streaming services cut out the middleman of the movie theaters and allow the studios to make more money off the movies. But we know that because they've talked about it extensively, that David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, who are the heads of these newest Halloween projects, they're huge movie buffs and they are huge fans of the franchise. And though, we haven't interviewed them or anything, but I think it's probably fair to say that they wanted this to be in theaters. This was something that they probably wanted to hold out for.
I think so. Yeah, I'm glad they could. But we digress heavily, I guess. Going back to the plot, all these people that got slashed in this car, this little crime fighting group. Later, this is another instance of Michael playing with the bodies. He positions them to be sitting on a playground as if they're playing on it. Like one's hanging from a swing set, one's on the like little carousel thing. And they're all wearing masks, and I love this little cameo homage. So Halloween 3 is famously the one everybody hates. It's not got Michael Myers in it. It's about these masks that children wear, and it like turns them into bugs. They're evil masks, basically. And the company that makes them in that movie makes 3 varieties of mask, one being a jack-o'-lantern, one being a witch, and the third one is a skeleton. And they use those 3 masks in this movie. Some kids are wearing it earlier, and then Michael gets those masks and puts it on these bodies. And it's just a cool little cameo. I think it probably went over a lot of people's heads because it's real subtle, but I appreciated it. I had actually just seen Halloween 3. So I
also appreciated it.
Yeah, I
even
liked
even though that is easily the worst entry in the Halloween franchise, I thought it was funny. It made me chuckle. I love the design of the witch mask. It's like classic warty green witch. So always fun to see.
Absolutely. And these bodies are discovered by Lindsay Wallace, of course. And we get this scene where Michael is still there and he starts chasing her through the woods and she's running. And I like this scene because we've seen Jason in the woods, but I don't think we've ever seen Michael Myers chase someone through the forest. He's always in a suburb, and I thought it was kind of cool to see him in a different environment. And
Yeah.
she ended up hiding behind a tree, and we get that classic shot where someone's underneath a tree and the ring wraiths are above or whatever.
That's exactly what it reminded me of.
Yeah, that ring wraith shot.
I was thinking of the hobbits hiding from the ring wraiths. Wow, you're making me want to watch Lord of the Rings. but yeah, reminded me of that scene too. I was a little disappointed that it didn't result in her getting killed.
Me too, but I do like that she's not in the rest of the movie because it makes her feel more just like, a citizen of the town instead of like this shoehorned in main character.
That's
But
true.
that is not to say that she won't be in the next movie, and I feel like they absolutely are going to try to shoehorn her in then.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, this we're entering a really interesting era of horror movies because we're getting a lot of very original, new work that is very fun. Right? We have the Jordan Peels, we have the Ari Asters, we have a lot of really solid working directors currently, and we have the nostalgia train where tons of movies are being remade. There's a I Know What You Did Last Summer series that's doing well now, and Scream Queens came around, and now of course there's the newest Scream movie that looks like it's ripping off this model of bringing back people from the original movie to shoehorn them into a new entry with some younger, fresher faces. We're entering uncharted waters here in the horror franchise. And while I'm glad that they did kill pretty much all of these, new old characters, I'll call them, characters from the first film, I'm cautiously optimistic about what the next entry will bring because they kept her around. Laurie's still here. And what I don't want to happen is these forced relationships that lead to even more exposition and lead to another weak entry. That's my fear as someone that wants to see a good Michael Myers film. But I guess we'll see. I was just hoping that she would die off in that scene.
Right. But now I would like to move on to, I think, our favorite characters, were they not? I'm sure you'd like to talk about them. Big John and Little
Big
John.
And Little John. Big and Little John, respectively.
Jesus. All right. Well, first of all, in the last movie, they acted like Michael's coming for Laurie, and Laurie seems to think that. But in this movie, we get a much more realistic view. They give the much more rational explanation that no, Michael's not after Laurie. Michael is a indiscriminate force of evil. He kills absolutely anyone and everyone he comes across. And so he's not back in Haddonfield to kill Laurie. He's back because he wants to go back to his home. The last place he's been, before he was locked up, the last home he's lived in besides an asylum. And he's making his way there slowly. And when we get to that home, we find out it is not abandoned, it is not empty, but it has been refurbished and has two denizens that are bizarre is an understatement. You should describe these characters because
Yeah. God, did I love them. Well, and I love them more knowing what I know now after doing some research. So we're introduced to a older gay couple that is currently living in Michael's house, or what was his house when he was a child. Now, there's a number of red flags here. Why the hell would anybody buy the Myers house? Actually, that's the biggest red flag, perhaps. I just don't buy that anyone would ever move here, especially knowing that
I would move there.
Sorry,
I would absolutely move there.
Okay, you're you, and you're ill. However, these men seem fine enough. They're serving up their cheese and they're serving up their grapes and their sausage, and they're just trying to have a nice Halloween night. You got Big John. They literally call each other this. Big John, played by Scott MacArthur. I actually knew I recognized this man. He is one of the welders in El Camino, the Breaking Bad movie, which I think is hilarious. But he's actually a main character on that Fox series that's pretty popular called The Mick. And then there is, of course, Michael Mcdonald playing Little John. Now, I know you're a youngin', Adam, and this might be before your time, but Michael Mcdonald was on Mad TV when I was growing up. He was also on Scrubs, on Comedy Central, but most importantly, Mad TV. He was, I believe the character's name was Stewie or Stewart. It was Stewart. This guy was huge on Mad TV, dude. Stewart like was one of the most popular characters. So they did cast two comedic actors specifically for these roles.
Well, I know who Michael Mcdonald is because he plays Gandhi in Clone High, which,
wow.
First of all, absolute legend, king.
Wow, he is a legend. He is a legend. And in my opinion, and I'm not just blowing smoke, like much like Big John was. This whole movie. Big John is just smoking reefer the entire time he's on screen. But I digress. I think these characters are very funny. They made me laugh. They exclusively call each other Big John and Little John. They have what seems to be a sweet relationship. There's like a picture of them in the room in their like office space of them like picnicking out in a field. I believe Big John's head is on Little John's lap. It's a whole thing. But I feel like we really get to know these two men in the 15 minutes that they're on screen. And it's this long, drawn-out build where they're first tricked by some trick-or-treaters into believing that one of the kids swallowed a razor blade. And then the kids sneak into the house while Michael McDonald's character is panicking and steal the candy from them. And that's when Big John begins to tell them the story of Michael Myers and explains that this is Michael Myers' house and he'll get you, he'll kill you, just like he killed his sister. And the kids freak out and run away. We do later see those kids again, and one of them is killed by Michael Myers off camera. But we continue to watch this couple interact. And sure enough, later on in the film, Michael does go back home and just murders these men brutally. They're playing a game of Marco Polo whenever they find out that there's an intruder in their house. They'll say, Big John, and one will answer, Little John. Big John, Little John. And they're essentially, doing sweeps of the rooms like would-be officers. Big John is the first to go. He gets his eyes skewered by Michael's meaty thumbs, and then you see like a brain seep out of the eye holes. It's really, really aggressive.
That's such in any media where someone gets their eye sockets pushed in like that, I think that's the most brutal kill. It's
super brutal.
Oh.
Yeah, he makes him look like one of those stress dolls, with the poppy eyes. Little John does die off camera, but his last comment is, Michael, you came home. And then he proceeds to die a brutal death. And Michael does arrange their bodies and lets them lie together as they are in that sweet picture that I described. You really got to watch the movie to see these two guys, though. They are a welcome, comedic moment in this movie. And I thought personally that it was actually some pretty funny writing. The relationship was funny. It was wholesome. And ultimately, it resulted in what was maybe a sadder kill than the others. I didn't care about much of the townspeople, but these guys were funny. They made me laugh, and I wanted to see them stick around a little longer.
Well, I would say I feel like you worship these characters a little too much. I think they were a nice comedic beat, but many things about them I was like, who does this? What person? Little John? And why are they Little John and Big John are their names? Like that's.
No, they call their pet names.
No. But it's like they only call each other that. Never John. And it's crazy. And then like, Michael, you're home. Like what?
Yeah, that Scream. Is a terrible line.
Scream, you're about to be stabbed.
He did scream off camera, if you recall.
Oh, and then they introduced Big John by him like alone in a room singing to some like Halloween music. He's got a record on and he's like dancing. And it's like...
And he's smoking.
Yeah, and he's smoking some reefer, and it's like Spider-Man 3, like Peter Parker dancing in an alleyway for no reason. It's so like weird,
yeah, it is pretty
jarring
bizarre
at first, but then you come to enjoy the comedic nature of it. And
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. It is jarring, and then you just kind of go with the flow. Um, the theater that we were in was loving this scene by the end of it. These characters were a hit. I don't know. I thought they were funny.
yeah, they were. But now Michael's back home, and we've gotten some drama with Laurie's horrifically written daughter and granddaughter. And basically, the granddaughter's like, he killed my dad. I have to go fight him. Which I think every character in this movie, he killed my blank. I have to go fight him, is their entire motivation. And she joins the vigilante groups with her boyfriend from the last movie and his dad. They show up to Michael Myers' house and they go in and get murdered, get absolutely wrecked, because of course they would. Why would you barely escaped last time? Why do you think you'd be better this time? Why do you think 3 clowns is gonna kill this absolute madman? But Laurie's granddaughter doesn't get killed because she has that plot armor, and it's like kind of frustrating to see. Her boyfriend though gets brutally wrecked, and we do at least get to see Michael throw her down a staircase and have her leg get snapped in half.
Yeah. So Judy Greer and Andy Matichek, I think is her name, play the daughter and granddaughter of Laurie Strode, respectively, in this movie. And I actually like Judy Greer. She's been in several things that I've enjoyed her in. She largely did a lot of rom-coms in the early 2000s. And I've liked her in like most things I've seen her in. But in the last movie, Halloween 2018, and in this movie, she is just so flat. Her performance is so one note and just not enough for a movie of this nature, where the stakes are so high. She just gives so little. And it's weird. I don't know. I would expect more from someone as seasoned as her. Andy Matichek is fine, I guess, as Allison. You know, she plays Laurie Strode's granddaughter. You know, she brings something to the table, but ultimately, there's just nothing very impressive about these two in this movie, and so because they are such important characters to Laurie Strode, and because Laurie Strode is so integral to this story, it drags it down a bit, and it's oh no, it's a little weird. It's just a little weird. They're very flat and not incredibly interesting, which sounds kind of mean, but it is what it is.
Oh, they're so like uninteresting. They're just daughter, granddaughter, no character. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
Very boring writing, but there is some payoff. So, just as Michael's about to slash poor Andy, her mother appears and she stabs him in the back with a pitchfork and kind of saves her. But Michael gets back up, of course, and just before he kills the granddaughter, Judy Greer grabs his mask off his head, and you know that's Michael's face, and he needs it back. So he drops everything, and clearly the idea is he's going to target her. So she starts running away, and he has to chase her. And they end up in the middle of a road. She throws the mask down. He reaches down to pick it up, and she does this once again, as every character in this movie has done, does this I'm a badass moment where she goes, gotcha. And then some lights go on, some headlights, and Michael's surrounded actually by this vigilante lynch mob. And there's, you know, so many people showed up. They all have weapons. Surprisingly, though, only 2 had guns. The whole time I was thinking, if this was Texas, it would be the absolute arsenal, 3%ers.
Ready. I don't know what they do in Illinois, but not very effective.
They only had 2 guns, and one of them was on a cop. So
that's all they have.
I guess
that's all they have in them, apparently.
But then they just proceed. They lay into his chest with a bunch of gunfire. They beat him up. They're hitting him with chains and bats and everything. Michael's been shot repeatedly in the chest, and now he's on the ground. It's all over. Michael lays there in a pool of blood, and the movie's ending. Judy Greer goes back to her daughter, comforts her, and the police are showing up outside, and Judy Greer goes upstairs. Something just about this house is attractive. It's got this strange lure to it. And as she's investigating upstairs, we go back to the body of Michael Myers, and we get shots between Officer Hawkins and Laurie Strode in the hospital room talking together about how Michael has kind of transcended humanity. With each kill, he gets stronger and becomes less human. And as we get this narration and shots cut between them and Michael, we see the spark return to Michael's eye, and he gets up and he kills everybody in this group. And you get to see him strangle Tommy Doyle to death, which I wish it was a more brutal kill. I wish it was more interesting than just a strangulation, but I do think there's some nice poetry in the idea that this man escaped Michael as a child and he came back at him as an adult and will now be killed anyway at the hands of this monster.
What I really wanted to see him do was beat up Tommy with that awful bat that he was lugging around the whole time, like some, character from Train to Busan, which is a good movie, by the way. But yeah, I wanted that. I didn't get it. For me, the mob scene, I should say that my expectations were subverted. I was happy ultimately with the way that it ended up because I was sweating around this point of the movie. I was really worried that that's how it was going to end, and that the townspeople would kill Michael, that we wouldn't see Laurie and him duke it out, and that we wouldn't see Judy Greer's terrible, terrible character die, nor her daughters. I was sweating. I loved when he got back up and killed them all. And I really did like that action happening simultaneously with Laurie's monologue about how he's basically evil. Just like evil incarnate, as I've been saying. I enjoyed that. However, I didn't like that a lot of the kills happened off camera. I didn't like the way in which the scene was shot. I wanted more of that brutality that they had presented throughout the entire movie in this final scene. I thought it would have been a great way to end it. But instead, they went for a flashier, much like that opening firefighter scene approach. And it just didn't do it for me, personally. I wanted to see it be meatier, more aggressive, more visceral, and I didn't get it. But I did get something that I really, really wanted. He kills Judy Greer at the very end of the movie. He kills Judy Greer. He kills the Strode daughter. And oh, how sweet was it? How sweet was it that this annoying character did not get what she wanted?
Thank God. Yeah. And I like the way he did it too. She's looking out the window of Michael's sister's bedroom, which is a theme they keep touching on. Is like Michael was weirdly transfixed by this window as a child. He would always go and just stare out of it. And at one point they have this sort of monologue where they say like maybe he wasn't looking out, but he was looking at his own reflection and looking in and like seeing the evil and being hypnotized by it. And I really like this mythology of Michael. I like it. And she goes out and looks out the same window and then turns around and there's Michael with his knife. And then he slashes her in the same fashion he killed his sister in the original movie all those years ago in the same room. And you might say it's not a very, particularly brutal or interesting kill, and that they didn't, the way that it was shot, they didn't show it like too much, but I like the sort of not clear, flashy back and forth way it was shot because it mirrors that original kill that Michael had, his first kill that was his sister.
Yeah, and it's from his point of view.
From his point of view, I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed that too. After we had finished watching the movie and you kind of told me about that, I did revisit it in my head and I liked it more. And I'm just celebrating the fact that he essentially wins at the end of the movie. I thought it would be too easy for him to just die this film. And I love when they establish that supernatural element to these slashers. because these characters, they are immortal. They're certainly immortal to us, right? Even if he dies in, let's say, Halloween 2 all those years ago, guess what? He comes back in the fourth one. It's the same thing with Jason. It's the same thing with Freddy. They're immortal to us. Why not play with that immortality in the films and do so openly? You know, oftentimes these movies, these classic slashers, they will only play with the notion that the characters are immortal and they'll never confirm. I love that this movie straight up confirmed it. And for me, I'm very excited to see what happens in the next one.
Yeah, I've always liked the sort of ambiguous nature of Michael. Like, he is a human, he is a man, but there's always this weird supernatural aspect to him. Like, why does he do this? And how is he so strong and unstoppable? But you think, like, surely there is a supernatural aspect. There has to be. At the end of the original,
Right.
he gets shot in the chest and then he disappears anyway. And here they really lay into it and confirm it at the ending, because once again he gets shot in the chest a bunch, then he gets back up and starts killing again, and he really is an unstoppable force of evil, and that's how it ends. And it is a great way to set up the next movie. The stakes are raised, they're back, Laurie will be back, and here we are, final fight, Michael versus Laurie, and I'm excited for it.
Me too. I am too. I'm also ready for the Streets of Rage style beat 'em up set in Haddonfield, Illinois. You play as Michael fighting angry townspeople.
Yeah.
Make that happen.
I will say, please go watch this movie if you can. I had a great time. It's meant to be watched in theaters. It feels like a good cinema movie, and
Yeah.
I had a great time watching it. Adrian?
Yeah, no, I loved it. With COVID cases going down the way they're going, and things hopefully being on the up and up as far as positivity goes. Uh, I think this is a great way to ring in the fall, to ring in the spooky season. And man, I had a blast seeing this with you yesterday. I thought it was awesome, and it's been a pleasure to talk about it. So thank you, and I'm glad that we're starting this new project together. Cast from the Crypt.
Cast from the Crypt, baby. Yeah, I had a blast with you too, man. I'm glad we got to see it. This is a great way to ring in the return of cinema. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and goodbye. Happy Halloween.